Severe weather is likely across portions of the southern tornado alley, including Texas and Oklahoma, tomorrow afternoon into Wednesday morning here. Very favorable conditions, including shear and as well some pretty high temperatures leading to the Cape. And we already have a very large slight risk here on the level 2 from Texas all the way up to Kansas. So very good threat possibly for an enhanced risk to be issued by tomorrow. Okay, keep a very, very close eye on the threats here and timing. But without further ado, let's get in the video. So here's a look now at what we have so far for day 2. So we have a very, very large slight risk already here. We have yet to get an enhanced risk, but it's looking pretty likely we're at least getting an enhanced risk for tomorrow, most likely for the hail probability, as we do have right now a 15% chance hatched and significant severe risk for hail across portions of western Texas. So going to be really watching out whether they're going to get at least extended to a 30% chance hatched, leading to the probability for an enhanced risk here. But as you do see, a lot of people in southern tornado alley are under a slight risk here, which is that yellow shaded areas across the risk for severe weather, and that's basically a level 2 out of 5 here. And you kind of see the levels right here. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Obviously, the higher you get in the level, the better probability for some pretty extreme severe weather. But as of now, we're only at a level 2, but still, it's a pretty large slight risk here, and there's definitely a pretty good threat possibly for an enhanced risk to be issued. So we have around 6.1 million people that are under this slight risk here, but it does cover a lot of areas up to 158,000 square feet here, or square miles, sorry. If it was square feet, that would be very, very, very small slight risk. I mean, square feet, I mean, imagine if it was 150,000 square feet. That would actually be really, most likely, one of the smallest slight risks ever. But again, it includes pretty big cities and especially some pretty big metro areas such as the OKC metro, including Wichita, and as well, including much of west central Texas here, Abilene, Lubbock, and of course going to ports of the Tulsa, Oklahoma. There, much of Oklahoma is under slight risk, much of south central and southeastern Kansas as well as included in the slight risk, and much of western Texas as well as under the slight risk. And there's definitely a pretty good probability that the enhancers could very well be extended or at least issued in western Texas and southwestern Oklahoma. They're based on what models are showing here intensity wise, and as well just I guess the probability in general for some severe weather. But marginal risk as well as pretty widespread, actually all the way from the Great Lakes down to the border of Mexico. So basically going straight up the central United States here, including around 19.2 million people, San Antonio, Dallas, Fort Worth, Minneapolis, and Arlington. So pretty widespread threat for some severe weather. But very interesting. We actually have a 2% chance for tornadoes across Nebraska, Colorado, and Kansas. So that's actually a little bit on the a little bit odd, showing you how widespread this severe weather threat is going to be tomorrow. Not just the South Central, but obviously the main area to watch is the South Central, including Texas, western Texas, and as well ports of the western Oklahoma. So we actually do have two areas that are highlighted under this 5% chance for tornadoes. And 5% is, you're in a 5% chance, that's obviously a slight risk for tornadoes. So you got to keep a very close eye on whether you can get a tornado warning, something like that. So I would have a plan just in case, because this is not out of 100% chance. This is out of 60% chance. So basically, that's actually not too shabby of a risk here. It's not literally a 5% chance. It's actually a little bit higher. I'd say basically in real words a 20%, maybe 50% chance for a tornado. So if you're under the 5% chance, which is actually highlighted in that brown, I would definitely have a plan ready, whether you're in, whenever you're getting a tornado warning, or if there's the sirens are going off, just have your plan ready just in case, because you guys, specifically this area right here, you guys most likely could be issued in the enhanced risk, most likely for hail, though not tornadoes. Let's hope we don't get a 10% chance, but it's not looking extremely likely that we'll get a 10% chance upgrade. But you do see around under a million, or really under 500,000 people are under this 5% in general, including both highlighted areas. Includes Abilene, Atlas, Oklahoma, Ovid, Texas, Sweetwater, Texas, and Snyder, Texas. So I guess a little bit on the more rural portion of the state there. And then a very large 2%, main 2% there across obviously Tornado Alley, including Fort Worth, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Lubbock, and Amarillo. That's what we have a very small 2% chance there up in the Central Plains in just general western or central United States, including northwestern Kansas, southwestern Nebraska, and northeastern Colorado. The wind threat, a little on the lower side here. We possibly will see a pretty big wind threat on day 3, as it most likely all become one pretty large significant squall line by the time they get to these areas. So day 3 gonna really possibly watch out for at least 15% chance for winds, but at least tomorrow's really won't be too big of a wind threat here. Obviously, we can get some pretty gusty winds with the first elevated storms, but then they'll quickly become surface based, which is kind of why that hail threat and possibly even tornado threat will increase overnight. So 15% chance of cleaning around 4.5 million people there. Basically, if you round, or actually it's 4.4, but it's basically almost 4.5. So rounding it up to 5. So I mean, I don't know if that's how it works. I mean, but the cities that are included in this 50% chance, which is light risk for winds, include Oklahoma City, Lubbock, Abilene, Norman, and Wichita Falls, Texas. There, so a little bit more well-known areas. And then we have 5% chance as well. We have another one there, another little small area isolated up to the at least the outlier of the severe weather event up there across portions of the outside the Rockies there in southwestern and central Nebraska, northeastern Colorado, even southwestern Wyoming. You guys are trying to get your, I believe this is your first ever really, I guess, risk for the year here, and as well as north central Kansas. But the hail threat, that's definitely going to be the threat for severe weather. This is definitely be the biggest threat there and the most common threat for tomorrow. We actually have two hatch risks there within this 50% chance, and I do think there is a chance at least they get a smaller size or a less thick size. I think there's definitely a chance for an enhanced risk to be issued within that top significant risk here. I'm not sure about that bottom one down there near the is it Rio Grande? That's that one separating Texas and Mexico, but it's basically right there on the border there of Texas and Mexico. So we have two areas that are under the significant severe. This includes around 1 million people, which includes Lubbock, Midland, Odessa, Big Spring, and Kerrville. And then we have the general 50% chance, including overall 6.3 million people. There you got Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Wichita, Lubbock, and Abilene. And then a very large 5% chance, which is exactly what the marginal so widespread tomorrow. And that's including around, of course, that 19.5 million people. And then on day 3, we already have a pretty large marginal risk, and then definitely keep a close eye on whether we can get a slight risk or not. Let's now get ahead and look at the HRR3 kilometer on the 18Z, so we can actually get a bit better look at the 48-hour outlook instead of looking at the NAM here. So we're gonna start getting some storms as early tomorrow afternoon across portions of Texas. There around 1 o'clock, getting a few storms there that most likely will just bring in some hail and gusty wind across the southwestern portion of the state there. As we go later on now within the evening hours, early evening, late afternoon, we're going to start seeing some more severe storms there across Texas as well. We can't rule out the possibility for some pretty intense storms there near Wyoming, Nebraska, and Colorado. You guys can very well possibly see some scattered gusty wind, and as well a very small tornado threat there. You guys are under a 2% chance there for tornadoes. And you kind of see we can start to see some scattered intense storms there across the northeastern portion of the state there in Colorado, making its way towards the Nebraska and Kansas as we go into the evening hours there. But by 6 o'clock, gonna get some more, more intense storms across central Texas and possibly see mainly a big hail threat there. But as we get later on the evening hours, conditions are gonna get a lot more favorable for some storms to start firing off there across northwestern Texas and the southwestern portion of Oklahoma. But you see these storms will start to make their way towards the east here. These first storms that develop early in the afternoon, those will make their way into the DFW area by around 6 o'clock there, making their way towards College Station, and as well even making their way near Gainesville, Texas, keeping a very close eye on your area, possibly for some pretty gusty winds and some hail. But as the Cape Valley increase, going to get some pretty good dew points up in the lower 70s, and as well just overall pretty good conditions. We're going to start seeing some more storms starting to blow up there. It's going to be that big threat kind of more in the overnight hours. So this is going to kind of be a big late threat, so I'm not sure if I'm going to stream that or not. And you do see there tomorrow again around 8 o'clock some pretty intense storms there across western Nebraska, northeastern Colorado. And then you can see maybe some intense storms there near southeastern Kansas, which is kind of what we have a slight risk going as far north as those areas by basically almost midnight. And then that's when storms start becoming very severe and possibly even surface based. So by around 1 in the morning here, central time, some pretty intense storms there near northwestern Texas and as well southeastern Oklahoma, and these could very well be the tornadic ones and as well the big hail producers. So the biggest threat will be overnight, which is why it's a pretty big concern. As we now get to 6 a.m., some pretty intense, possibly supercells across south central and central Oklahoma. It's going to continue to make their way towards the east here, and those will become the biggest threat there for later into Wednesday afternoon across portions of Oklahoma there, Arkansas, pretty big possibly widespread wind threat. You can kind of see it's all going to become a big squall line by the late morning and early afternoon hours from Texas there to Missouri and Arkansas. So pretty intense winds there for sure on day 3, and obviously that'll continue to make its way towards the Mississippi River later on by tomorrow, or not tomorrow, by Wednesday evening into Thursday morning here. But let's now go ahead and get into the overall conditions. Pretty good temperatures, like I've been mentioning. Actually, very unseasonably warm temperatures, actually, as far north as the Midwest and Great Lakes here for tomorrow. You can kind of see some getting as far as the 90s across areas in northwestern Texas. They're exactly we're going to be watching out for tomorrow. You see some really warm temperatures, exactly where we're going to be seeing possibly the biggest threat for severe weather, the upper 80s and lower 90s. So just pretty favorable conditions there overall. Some pretty humid atmosphere, very warm temperatures. It's basically gonna be like summer. It's basically May at this point. These temperatures. Look at 4 o'clock, gonna get nearly 90 degrees there in DFW. You're gonna get nearly 90 degrees there in north central Missouri. You're gonna get nearly 85 and 86 there up in Chicago. Nearly 90 as far north as Kansas City. So very warm temperatures, of course, and they will definitely lead the threat for some pretty good temperatures as far as basically all night. So we're gonna be seeing basically summer-like temperatures for the overnight hours, not getting below the mid 60s here, and even some areas below the lower 70s in some areas here. By let's see, get towards around let's go towards 11 o'clock. That's when some stores are gonna start getting pretty intense there across northern and western Texas. You can kind of see still that late in the mid 70s and as well even upper 70s and some portion of the state there. And then I get to 3 a.m. That's kind of where you're still really watching out for those pretty intense storms crossing into Oklahoma. Still some pretty good upper 70s. I mean, and that's 3 a.m. 4 a.m. still some upper 60s and lower 70s in the middle of the night there. So pretty darn good temperatures overall for some severe weather development. Not only that for development, but overnight, all night development here. So keeping a very close eye on that. Let's now go ahead and take a look at the Cape Valleys. You're probably thinking these Cape Valleys are going to be extremely high because of those temperatures, but they're actually not going to be that crazy high. We're actually not that high in general. Let's go ahead and look at the Cape Valleys here. You can kind of see by 11 in the morning some widespread 1,500, 1,600 there across north, central, and northwestern Texas. And then again to the 2 o'clock time frame, we're going to be seeing up to over 2,000 joules per kilogram there across northern Texas and as well across portions of Oklahoma. And then into the eastern and southern portion there, the state going to get nearly 3,000 joules per kilogram. But by 5 o'clock, you can see some pretty good storms there across central Texas. Pretty good Cape Valleys for you guys. But look at the panhandle and look at southwestern Oklahoma. Nearly 200, 300 joules per kilogram. So that's basically nothing here. I mean, it'll basically increase a little bit by kind of 2, 3 a.m. Gonna get early under 1,000, but I mean the Cape Valleys are very low considering the temperatures and the overall conditions. So that's gonna be the big reason why this won't be a moderate risk or a high risk like people thought when the Day 7 outlook came out. Enhanced risk will definitely possibly be issued at least for a small portion because of the hail probability, some pretty good lapse rates, but overall Cape Valleys are pretty darn low. Let's go ahead and look at the helicity though. So let's go to 6 o'clock here. You're going to get a pretty big wave there across western Texas of over 400 on the reading there for helicity. So pretty high overall helicity there on 0 to 1 kilometer. Let's now go to later into the midnight time frame. That's when storms are going to get pretty common there across Oklahoma as well across the portion there of Texas. Going to get over 300 there across western Oklahoma. And some widespread upper 200s and lower 300s across north, central, and northwestern Texas. Obviously, as we go overnight, those numbers will definitely dramatically decrease here, but as well, can really watch out for the threat for that some severe weather across portions of Oklahoma there, Arkansas, and Texas tomorrow. Some pretty widespread and scattered 200 to 300 there on the scale. Let's now go ahead and check looking at the supercell composite index, and you kind of see overall by 5 o'clock, pretty low numbers here. There's some small chances for some supercells across central Texas in the early evening hours there, 5, 6 o'clock. Some scattered storms there are possible to become supercells here, but that's going to be mainly a threat for hail, not really tornadoes. But you can notice we're going to be seeing some higher single digits there, 8 and 9, maybe even as high as a 10 there in into the double digits. And then it'll gradually increase there up to around an 18 there across central Texas. But as we now go later on to 10 o'clock here, you can kind of see now to midnight, there's really no high numbers for supercells in the areas we're going to be really watching out for. But you can kind of see we have the slight risk down there in southwestern Texas. Some pretty good numbers there into the upper teens and lower 20s. But obviously those numbers are going to be a little bit too high in case you're going to get to a 36. So that's going to definitely be a little bit too high coming 3, 4 a.m. So not going to see that crazy confidence for supercells that early in the morning here. Let's not go ahead and look at the significant tornado parameter. You can kind of see it. I mean, obviously it's going to be very similar, very low numbers. At least if we get some high numbers, either it's going to be because the models are, specifically the HPR is looking at overall conditions and not considering that there's going to be some cap here. And as well, very low K values. But let's now go ahead and look at 7 o'clock here. Very low numbers here, 1s, 2s. But this is going to be the eye-catching part. You can kind of see this big area of over a 10 in southwestern Texas. And that area actually is under a slight risk here. And actually, some of these areas are actually under a hatch risk for hail. And I know that's a very scary numbers. These scary numbers up to 11.9. That's definitely a concerning number. But like I've mentioned before, the HPR, NAM, and overall models like to show very high STP numbers, not considering limiting factors. I mean, they're looking at the temperatures, dew points, shear, every condition, seeing overall average, how great the conditions, and how is this going to lead to like a number on the scale here. So since it's pretty darn good conditions overall, except for the Cape, we're going to show a pretty good number here for significant tornadoes. But obviously, we all know this number does not make sense. I mean, it's a computer model. It really does not consider the limiting factors, really, specifically capping. Usually considers the Cape, but I don't know if they're not noticing the areas of very low Cape here. I mean, some of these areas could get nearly 2,000 joules per kilogram, but on the time frame we're looking at midnight. I mean, by that time, Cape values are going to be very low, even those areas. As you see there, maybe a moderate chance for tornadoes there near northwestern and north central Texas. This could definitely be a valuable number because it's kind of more favorable area and actually, I guess, a better area to just overall look at conditions. Look at that 18 there, getting up to a 9 and almost a 19 on the scale. I mean, that's just not going to happen at all. So these numbers, I know they're pretty intimidating, but do not worry at all. Let's now go look at the 0 to 6 kilometer shear, and it's going to wrap up the video. So by noon tomorrow, some pretty strong global jet there. Kind of bring a ton of shear there from the southwest. That's just going to bring in pretty favorable conditions overall alone for some severe weather across Texas, and that's what going as far across the central United States. And that's exactly why we have such a widespread margin risk there for hail. But let's now go toward the early evening here. That's just going to rapidly increase across specifically Texas there. So that's kind of what we're going to be seeing. Threat force and pretty strong storms developing across central Texas specifically, because that's kind of where we're seeing our best conditions, including Cape up to 3,000 joules per kilogram. But I mean, it's still not going to be too crazy. But the shear is going to really increase there across portions of Texas and Oklahoma by the late dusk hours there into the early morning there. By midnight, a ton of shear there, getting up to around 60 to 70 knots there, of course, between 0 to 6 kilometers. So you're seeing a pretty big difference between the surface to the 6 kilometers in the atmosphere. So pretty big difference there, up to 115 knots in some areas. So it's showing you we're going to be seeing a lot of shear in the atmosphere, basically. I mean, that's a pretty big difference between this surface and 6 kilometers. So pretty overall, a ton of shear there, and it's going to really allow for some pretty good conditions. But again, with a very low Cape, it really won't be a significant outbreak like people were thinking. I mean, if these K values were like at 3,000 or 4,000, this would definitely be a moderate risk. And again, if this were to happen in May, we'd be talking about a whole different scenario here. But hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys later.